Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a huge one, a question humanity's grappled with forever, really. What is the true nature of things?
It sounds impossibly big, doesn't it? Philosophers, scientists, they've all taken a crack at it.
Exactly. But our source today introduces someone considered pretty close to understanding the answer, as close as anyone gets right now.
Indeed. We're diving into excerpts from Reality is Not What It Seems. It's by the Italian theoretical physicist Carlo Rovelli.
Okay.
And he's a leading figure in something called quantum gravity theory.
Quantum gravity theory, that sounds intense.
It is. It's basically the best bet we have right now for a theory of everything.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that we can explain all the physical mysteries, all the particles, all the forces with just a few fundamental concepts.
A theory of everything. Okay, so how did he end up writing a book like this for people like us, not just physicists?
Yeah, it's a great story, actually. People have been telling him for ages, write a book explaining quantum gravity. But he struggled. He couldn't find the right sort of narrative thread. Then he's driving, and a friend's question just pops into his head. What do you think is the true nature of things?
Ah.
And suddenly, boom, he realized that was the way in. Trace humanity's journey, asking that question, all the way up to the latest research. That way he could make these really deep theories clear.
And here's where it gets really interesting, right? He got so caught up thinking about it.
He did. He basically mapped out the whole book in his head while driving, so lost and thought he was speeding, and got pulled over by the police.
No way. What happened?
Apparently, he explained his whole epiphany to the officer. And maybe the officer was a science buff. Who knows? But he let him go, told him good luck with the book. And that's how it came to be.
Wow. That really shows how a clear question can just unlock everything.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to try and do here. Following Rovelli's lead, we'll explore this nature of things in 3 parts. First, what's matter? Then, what is space? And finally, maybe the weirdest one, what is time?
All right, let's do it. Part 1, the nature of matter. Our source kicks off with a really powerful idea from, a giant of physics, Richard Feynman.
Oh, yeah, Feynman.
Ah.
He once told his students, imagine some catastrophe wipes out all scientific knowledge. If you could pass only one sentence to the next generation, what should it be?
And his answer was?
His answer? All things are made of atoms. Rovelli completely agrees.
All things are made of atoms. Simple, but when you think about it, there's so much packed in there. What are the key things you, the listener, should take away?
Well, at least 3 huge things jump out. 1, everything, no matter how different it looks, stars, rocks, you, me, it's all assembled from the same basic parts.
Okay, same building blocks.
2, nothing is truly solid or, monolithic. You can always break things down further, right down to the most basic indivisible bits.
Indivisible bits, got it.
And 3, if everything's made of the same stuff, then it must all follow the same fundamental rules. There are universal laws governing everything.
Now, this idea of atoms, it feels ancient, right? It wasn't Feynman's idea originally.
Not at all. Way back, over 2,000 years ago, you had the ancient Greek scholar Democritus. He was convinced matter was made of atoms.
But he couldn't see them back then. How did he figure it out?
Pure thought experiment. It's brilliant, really. He said, imagine matter is infinitely divisible. You could just keep cutting something smaller and smaller until eventually you'd have something with no dimension left, just a point. Right.
Okay.
But then try putting those dimensionless points back together. No matter how many you stack up, you can never create something that actually has dimension, like length or width.
Ah, I see. That doesn't make sense. It's a contradiction.
Exactly. Contradiction. So Democritus argued the only way out is if the starting idea was wrong. Matter can't be infinitely divisible.
So it must be made of tiny, finite, indivisible things.
Precisely. Which he called atoms. And he even pictured the universe as this infinite space, just filled with countless atoms moving around, no center, no edges.
That's pretty radical for, 400 BC? And it stayed just an idea for ages?
For over 2,000 years, yeah. Just a hypothesis. Until 1905. Enter a 25-year-old Albert Einstein. He's the one who finally nailed the proof for atoms. And get this, he did it without ever actually seeing one.
How? How do you prove something you can't see?
Again, a thought experiment, plus some clever math. He looked at tiny things like dust motes dancing in a sunbeam or pollen grains jiggling on water.
Yeah, you see that sometimes, Brownian motion, right?
That's the one. He reasoned that this constant random jiggling must be caused by something unseen, hitting them countless tiny air or water molecules bumping into them from all sides.
Okay, that sounds plausible, but where's the leap? Where's the genius proof?
Here's the clever bit. Einstein imagined, okay, what if those molecules were infinitely small and infinitely numerous, like a perfectly smooth, continuous fluid? Well then, every single push from one side would be perfectly balanced by a push from the opposite side, instantly.
Ah, so the dust mote wouldn't move at all.
Exactly, it would sit there. But that's not what we see. We see the jiggling.
Another contradiction. So the assumption of infinite tiny molecules must be wrong.
Precisely. Molecules must have a finite size, and there must be a finite number of them. That way, the collisions aren't perfectly balanced all the time. There's a slight randomness, a net push here and there, causing the jiggle.
And he could calculate their size from that?
Yeah. He realized the smaller the molecules, the more frequent the collisions, the better they'd balance out, and the less the dust particle would move. By measuring how much the particles jiggled, he could work backward and estimate the size of the molecules doing the bumping.
Wow. So after 2 millennia, Einstein proves Democritus right. Matter is particles. But the story doesn't end there, does it? Our understanding kept evolving.
Oh, absolutely. The last century brought quantum mechanics, which, well, it blew everything up again in a way.
How so? Did it disprove atoms?
No, it confirmed the core idea. Matter can't be infinitely divided. There's a smallest scale, a minimum chunk of lengths of energy of everything. You can't just keep chopping things forever. That's just math, not reality.
Okay, so it confirms the particle idea, but you said it blew things up.
Right. Because quantum mechanics reveals something really, really weird. Something totally counter to how we usually see the world.
Uh-oh. What is it?
It tells us that fundamentally, at the quantum level, the true nature of things isn't really solid, separate objects. It's more like processes, events.
Processes, not objects. That sounds really strange. How can a rock be a process? Can you give us an analogy?
Rovelli uses a great one. Think about the ocean. You see waves, right?
Sure.
A wave looks like a thing moving across the water. But is it? Or is it just the water itself caught up in a particular motion, a process? When the motion stops, the wave disappears. It's just water again.
Okay, I see that. A wave is water doing something.
Exactly. Or think about a river, a lake, a waterfall. They all look different, but they're all just water involved in different processes, different flows, different interactions.
So apply that back to us.
Yeah.
To this desk. How are we processes?
Well, from the quantum view, you aren't a fixed thing. Particles are constantly zipping in and out of your body. You're exchanging matter and energy with your surroundings all the time. You're more like that wave, a flowing pattern, an event, a process that's temporarily stable.
So my feeling of being a solid, continuous self is kind of an illusion.
At the most fundamental level, yeah, a useful one. But quantum mechanics says reality is built from interactions. Particles only really are something, or have definite properties, when they interact. A stone isn't just sitting there, it's a complex vibration, a quantum process maintaining its structure for a while, like a standing wave.
An object is an unchanging process. Wasn't that a quote you mentioned?
Exactly. Rovelli cites that from a philosopher. It captures this shift. Stop thinking static objects, start thinking dynamic processes, interactions. That's the quantum view of matter.
Okay. Mine's slightly bent. Let's move to space. What's the deal with space? We heard Democritus thought it was just an infinite empty box for atoms.
Right. And that idea, space as a passive stage, a fixed background, it's stuck around for a long time.
Yeah.
Even Newton, with all his laws of motion and gravity, basically saw space like that, a rigid container where the action happens.
But that changed too, didn't it? Something came along and messed with that simple picture.
It did. The game changer was the concept of the field. Think like magnetic fields around a magnet, or electric fields.
Ah, okay. We know about those.
The discovery and understanding of fields, especially the electromagnetic field, was revolutionary. It's the basis for, well, almost all modern technology. Radio, TV, internet, Wi-Fi. None of that works without understanding fields.
But how did fields mess up the idea of space?
Because suddenly things got complicated. You had matter, atoms. You had space, the container. And now you had these fields in space. How did they all relate? Especially when gravity got described as a gravitational field. Was gravity a force between atoms, or was it this field thing? How did the field affect the atoms, and how did the atoms affect the field? It was a conceptual tangle. Nobody could quite fit it all together.
Sounds messy. So who sorted it out? Let me guess. Einstein again.
You guessed it. Einstein, again, it's really quite incredible. He cut through all that complexity with one stunningly simple, elegant idea. It's considered one of the greatest leaps in human thought.
Okay, what was the question? What was the insight?
He just asked, what if? What if space isn't separate from the gravitational field? What if space is the gravitational field?
Wait, space is the field, not just something in the field.
Exactly. That's the core of his general theory of relativity. Space and the gravitational field are the same thing.
Whoa. Okay, what does that mean for how we understand the world? How does that simplify things?
It simplifies things massively. Suddenly, you don't have this confusing list. Space, particles, electromagnetic fields, gravitational fields. No, it just becomes particles and fields. And the fields we call the gravitational field, that is space.
So space isn't the rigid, unchanging box anymore.
Not at all, because if space is the gravitational field and fields can ripple, bend, and stretch, then space itself can ripple, bend, and stretch.
Wow.
Einstein had this great analogy. We aren't living inside some invisible, fixed scaffolding. We're living inside a giant, soft, active mollusk.
A mollusk. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe give us a more concrete example.
Think about the sun and the earth. We used to say the sun pulls the earth with gravity. Einstein says no. The sun, because it's massive, curves the space around it, like putting a bowling ball on a trampoline.
Right, it makes a dip.
Exactly. And the earth isn't being pulled, it's just rolling along a straight path through that curved space. It follows the curve. Planets orbit, things fall, because space itself is warped and curved by mass and energy.
Like a marble rolling around the inside of a funnel, it just follows the curve.
Perfect analogy. There's no mysterious force pulling the marble to the center. It's the shape of the funnel wall guiding it. That's how gravity works in general relativity. Space tells matter how to move, and matter tells space how to curve.
Okay, that's a huge shift. Space isn't separate from stuff, it's an effect of stuff. Like a magnet creates a magnetic field, matter creates space, or is space curving?
You got it. General relativity finally sorted out matter and space. Huge breakthrough. But, then came the next big problem.
There's always another problem, isn't there?
Seems like it in physics. This one was a clash of the titans. General relativity versus quantum mechanics. The two pillars of modern physics. They contradict each other. Profoundly.
How can they both be right and contradict each other? That sounds impossible.
It's the central problem. Both theories work incredibly well in their own domains. General relativity is brilliant for gravity, stars, galaxies, the big stuff. Quantum mechanics is amazing for atoms, particles, the small stuff. But try to use them together, like describing gravity on a quantum scale. They give nonsensical answers.
Rovelli has that joke, right?
Yeah.
About the physics student.
Yeah. If you take a general relativity class in the morning and a quantum mechanics class in the afternoon, you'd think your professors were totally confused because they're telling you contradictory things.
So give us an example of a contradiction relating to space.
Okay. General relativity, as we said, treats space as this continuous, smooth, flexible field, like that mollusk or a rubber sheet. It can bend and warp smoothly.
Right.
But quantum mechanics says everything is quantized. Everything comes in minimum packets, including space itself. There should be a smallest possible length, a shortest possible distance. Space shouldn't be smooth and continuous. It should be grainy, pixelated, discrete at some incredibly tiny level.
Continuous versus grainy, that's a direct clash. So how do we fix that?
That brings us right back to where we started. Quantum gravity theory. That's its whole job, to merge these two giants, to reconcile relativity and quantum mechanics. It's still a work in progress, very hypothetical, but it's our best shot.
And Rovelli is a leader in this. Does he offer a way to think about this grainy space?
He does. Again, an analogy. Think of space, the gravitational field, like a piece of cloth. From far away, it looks perfectly smooth, continuous, right?
Yeah, like a silk sheet.
But get really, really close, use a magnifying glass, and what do you see?
You see the individual threads, the weave. It's not actually smooth.
Exactly. Rovelli suggests space is like that. It looks smooth and continuous to us because we can't see down to the incredibly tiny threads it's woven from.
And these threads are?
They're the quanta of gravity, the tiny atoms of space itself, tiny particle-like excitations forming tiny fields all overlapping and interacting to create the large-scale gravitational field, the space that we experience.
So space is made of tiny particles, tiny quantum fields. Wait a minute, didn't we just say matter is made of tiny particles interacting, these processes?
You see where this is going? Quantum gravity leads to this mind-blowing conclusion. Maybe space and matter aren't fundamentally different things at all. Maybe both emerge from the same underlying reality. Light, energy, space, matter. Perhaps they are all just different manifestations, different vibrations or states of one single fundamental entity. Physicists call it the covariant quantum field.
The covariant quantum field. Everything is that.
That's the idea. It sounds incredibly weird, I know, but the math and physics are pointing that way. It's the most promising picture we have right now for the fundamental nature of both matter and space. One underlying reality manifesting as everything we see.
Okay. Matter is processes, space is a field made of quanta, and both might be the same thing underneath. That leaves time. You said that was maybe the weirdest part.
Yeah, because Rovelli makes another astonishing claim in the book. He argues that time as we usually think about it, this universal clock ticking forward everywhere, doesn't actually exist at the fundamental level.
Time doesn't exist. Now that sounds completely nuts. Like, how is that even possible? We experience time constantly.
I know, it sounds crazy, but it's not just random speculation. If you push a physicist, ask them what fundamentally distinguishes the past from the future, what gives time its arrow, they'll likely point to one thing: heat.
Heat? Like temperature. How is heat related to time?
Think about it. What's the most obvious thing about time? It only flows one way, right? Forward. Irreversibility.
Yeah, things happen. They don't unhappen.
Right. But most fundamental laws of physics, like how planets orbit or particles collide, they actually work perfectly fine forwards or backwards in time. If you filmed a pendulum swinging and ran the film backward, it would look totally normal.
Okay, yeah. A pendulum just swings back and forth.
Well, what about something clearly irreversible, like an egg breaking or wood burning?
Right, you can't play that backward. The smoke won't turn back into wood.
Exactly. And what's involved in those irreversible processes? Burning wood releases heat, and egg breaking dissipates energy, often as sound, and a tiny bit of heat from the impact and deformation. Any process that clearly defines an arrow of time seems to involve heat, or more precisely, thermodynamics.
So, like, friction wears things down. That generates heat. The sun burning, that's heat. Even us aging. Our bodies produce heat.
You got it. Trace any irreversible process, any arrow of time, down to its roots, and you find heat or entropy increase lurking there. Without heat, without thermodynamics, the fundamental equations don't really distinguish past from future.
Okay, so time's arrow is tied to heat. But what is heat, fundamentally?
Oh, that's the crucial step. What is temperature? What is heat? At the microscopic level, it's not really a fundamental property of a single particle. Temperature is about the average energy, the chaotic jiggling of a whole bunch of particles.
Average energy, so it's statistical.
Exactly. It's a macroscopic concept.
Yeah.
We talk about temperature because we can't possibly track every single molecule in this room. We blur things out, we average. Temperature is a description based on our incomplete knowledge of the microscopic details.
We're too lazy or unable to track every particle, so we invent temperature to describe the average messiness.
That's a good way to put it. If you could know the exact state, the position and velocity of every single particle, the very concept of temperature would kind of dissolve. It wouldn't be needed.
Okay, wait. So if temperature is just a result of our fuzzy average view of things, and the arrow of time depends fundamentally on heat and temperature,
Then what does that imply about time itself?
that time itself might also be just a result of our fuzzy view, something that emerges because we don't see the full microscopic picture.
That's precisely Rovelli's argument. Time isn't fundamental. It's an emergent property arising from our statistical, blurred-out description of the world.
Can you give an analogy for that?
Yeah.
How can something so real to us be not fundamental?
He uses the idea of drawing, like an auxiliary line in geometry, to help solve a problem. You draw the line to help you see the solution, right?
Yeah, sure.
But the line isn't really part of the original triangle or circle. It's a tool you added for your understanding. A genius mathematician might solve it without needing that extra line at all.
Ah, okay. So time is like that auxiliary line, something we use to make sense of things, but not part of the fundamental geometry of the universe.
Exactly. If we could perceive reality at its most fundamental quantum level, see all the interactions, the processes, the covariant quantum field doing its thing, the notion of a single flowing time might just disappear. It wouldn't be necessary to describe what's happening.
Wow. That leads to his definition of time, then.
Yes, his absolutely startling definition. Time is the result of us ignoring the microscopic physical states of things. Time is the information we don't have. Time is our ignorance.
Time is our ignorance. That's
Yeah.
profound. So let's try and sum this up. We started with matter being atoms, but now it's more like processes, interactions.
Right. Then space wasn't an empty box, but a dynamic field, the gravitational field itself. woven from quantum threads.
And matter and space might even be two sides of the same coin, this underlying quantum field.
Exactly. And finally, time. The river we all feel flowing might not be fundamental at all, but an illusion born from our incomplete perception tied to the concept of heat.
It really paints a picture of reality that's so different from our everyday experience, much more fluid, interconnected, less about solid objects and more about relationships and events.
It does. It challenges us to look past the surface. The universe, according to this view, is fundamentally simpler in a way, just these quantum fields interacting,
Yeah.
but also far stranger and more wonderful than we typically imagine.
It definitely leaves you thinking, how much of what feels real is just our human way of processing things? We hope this deep dive into Rovelli's reality is not what it seems has sparked some thoughts, maybe some aha moments for you.
Yeah. What really sticks with you from all this? Maybe the next time you look at something solid like a table or feel a moment passing, you'll wonder, what's really going on underneath? What processes, what quantum fuzziness am I averaging out to perceive this simple reality?